Director Emeritus.
Thank you, Tom. Can everybody? Okay. Good. Well, good evening, everybody. I was very happy to get the invitation to Protestant minister in the 50s, and he wrote a lot of wonderful things. And I always remember something that he said, and it is this. He says, before you get into bed at night or out of bed in the morning, simmer. I love that. Why? Because I love to eat, and I love. And if you know what you usually have water or some liquid in it, and then you put all the different spices and ingredients in there into a boil, and when it comes to a boil, turn down the heat and let it simmer. Well, it is turning down the heat that is the key. It is turning down the heat time that allows those flavors held together until you come up with a beautiful, delicious treat. Well, that's what I like to think of these days for us. It's a time to turn down the heat, if you will, and this can be a very high heat time, maybe not literally as terms of the weather, but in terms of the season. We're only a couple weeks away from Christmas, and there's all kinds of stuff going on, and so I would invite us all to turn down the heat and see what the Lord has to say to us. I firmly believe that the Lord has something to say to us anytime we gather like this. And so it's my honor to help us for a while to simmer. I have been waiting for weeks to do that. Okay, that's it. You're on your own from now on. So that is the Diaconate ordination there, that beautiful picture, and I thought that it would be nice to bring where we serve out here to the desert every so often through these slides. So I know that last year retreat, you spent a lot of time on the theme of evangelization, and the context of the theme this year is evangelization, and unpacked in a whole bunch of different ways that you'll see. And what I am going to do is talk about a lot of themes, and one of the main persons that is important for us these days, of course, is Pope Francis. And I've taken a lot of inspiration out of the things that he has written. And you saw probably on the cover of your book, and this is where I came up with the theme that being disciples Jesus can count on. Francis says, joy is born from the gratuitousness of an encounter. It is hearing someone say, but not necessarily with words, you're important to me. This is beautiful. And it is these very words that God makes us understand. In calling you, God says to you, you are important to me. I love you. I am counting on you. How lovely to let the Lord say that to us. Now, I can't start my reflection before I ask you one very important question, and I'd like you now together to please give me the definition of a homily. No, just kidding, we're not kidding. I also want you to know that this is not a homily. It's going to be more than 7 to 10 minutes, and this is called a presentation, a talk. So some of the principles that we learned in the homiletics for a homily there's different principles for this kind of presentation. So I want to begin by referring to Bishop Robert Barron, who says that evangelization is about telling the world the great story of which Jesus is the culmination. Beginning with the creation of the world, Israel, the temple, the prophets, all leading to Jesus Christ. I love that image of the great story, and we're all part of that. What is the task of evangelization? Well, we know it, and these are my words, but I like to think of evangelization as permeating the world with Jesus, saturating the world with Jesus Christ. And evangelization, if it is that, doesn't just happen automatically. This is not something that, it can be spontaneous, and it has to be on purpose. Evangelization is not some kind of phenomena that just happens like an unexpected storm or something on its own. It is intentional, and I like to think that saturating the world with Jesus has to do with doing that on purpose and with a purpose. If we want to evangelize, if we want to permeate the world with Jesus, then we need to bring the love of Christ to the world in a very specific, on-purpose way. And my imagery taken from Pope Francis is that we saturate the world with Jesus Christ if we are disciples that Jesus can count on. And I love this image because people that you can count on are very attractive. You know it in your own life. I know it in my own life. If somebody is there that I know and I can count on him or her, it's wonderful to have people like that around. We're drawn to people that we can count on. And, it's the people we can count on that we usually call to ask to help us and to be with us and guide us and all those kinds of things. We want to be around people and hang out with them, because there's something wonderful about somebody being that kind of presence. We want to learn from people we can count on. I've learned tons of stuff over the years from people that I can count on. We want people that we can count on in our lives. And so the way I figure it is, being people that can be counted on is something that is attractive to the world. That is one way that we can bring people to the Lord, is if people know that we can be counted on. So for ourselves, being disciples that Jesus can count on is at the heart of evangelization. Attraction. Want to permeate the world with Jesus, then we need to do that in an attractive way. And that is super important. Pope John the 23rd, he said the church needs to speak to the modern world. And that's why he called the council, to help the church be able to identify what is out there in the world and what needs to be addressed and how are we going to do it in a way that can be heard. But he also said, in speaking to the modern world, that does not mean that we are like the modern world. And that's super important. In other words, the modern world needs to be spoken to, but the modern world does not set the agenda for the church. And I'm afraid that in many ways that church instead of the other way around. In a way, if we're really permeating the world with Jesus, we get to set the agenda for the world. And that's pretty wonderful to think of. Pope Francis says, the church goes forth as a community of missionary disciples who take the first step who are involved and supportive, who bear fruit and rejoice. It is an evangelizing community that knows that the Lord has taken the initiative. He has first loved us, and therefore we can move forward boldly, making the initiative, going out to others, seeking those who have fallen away, standing at the crossroads, and welcoming the outcast. Such a community has an endless desire to show mercy, the fruit of its own experience, the fruit of the power of the Father's infinite mercy. And I love this. He goes on to say, he didn't put there, but I'm putting it there. Okay. He says, let us try a little harder to take the first step and to become involved. In other words, we're not to sit around waiting for somebody else to take the first step, waiting for the diocese, the parish, the church. Together we are to take the first step, and that first step is taken in our hearts. The disciple that Jesus counts on is the disciple that is involved, and that means taking the first step in participating. There's a great song. It's a country western song. It's called I Hope You Dance by Leanne Womack. And I just happen to have a recording of it if you ever want to hear it later on during the retreat. But anyway, it's a beautiful, lovely song. And it's a great song, I think, especially for parents to play for their kids, But anyway, there's a really neat line in it, and it goes like this. If you get the chance to sit it out or dance, I hope you dance. And I think that's what Francis is saying. If there's the chance to sit it out, waiting for somebody else, or dance, I hope you dance. Now, when it comes to the new evangelization, that also means that we don't just dance the same old dance over and over and over again. And that is a temptation. Participation needs, in other words, to happen with, as the church says, a new zeal and a new enthusiasm. This is one of the characteristics of the new evangelization called for by St. John Paul II. The work of evangelization is carried out with a new ardor and a new fire, and that is one, at least in my head, one of the primary purposes of this weekend together. As deacons, wives, ministers, disciples of Jesus, let us take this time to nourish our spirits with the goal of finding renewed ardor and enthusiasm for the task that the Lord has entrusted to us. I hope by the end of this weekend we want to say again, I got to get out. I can't wait to get out there again. The invitation that St. John Paul II gives us through the new evangelization is to carry out our ministries with that new fire and enthusiasm for what we proclaim Jesus has risen from the dead. Mark said in his homily tonight, he said, grace wins. And this is what we say in our family. We say life wins. We say life wins too. It's the grace of God within us that helps that to happen, because that's what Jesus did through his resurrection. Conquering sin, conquering physical death, life wins. In fact, in our family, and maybe now I have a new one to text, but whatever things especially are kind of tough and difficult, my brother and sisters and our nieces and nephews even, we text each other, remember, life wins. So I think I'm going to add a new one to it. Remember, grace wins. That's really cool. What better time than during this time of Advent and Christmas to open our hearts to that new zeal with this declaration of life winning and the potential parish-changing, world-changing possibilities that go with it. This is a time, and I love this, what I once heard a priest say, And that priest is Father Gordon Moreland. You might have known him, the director of the Priest's House of Prayer. Well, he said one time, I've never forgot it, he said, you know, guys, just let Jesus have his way. Just let Jesus have his way. That's what we need to do as disciples of Jesus. We need to just let Jesus have his way. What does that mean? It means we need to let Jesus forgive us, let Jesus console us, let Jesus inspire us, let Jesus guide us, let Jesus have mercy on us and our people. This is a time to do Jesus a favor and let him have his way. Let him love us the way he wants to love us. And why do I say that? Because I think sometimes we insist on our way. Sometimes we insist on being guilt-ridden. Sometimes we insist on being inconsolable in a problem or our grief. We insist sometimes on isolating ourselves, or being cynical, or being controlling, or being judging. I fall into all that stuff. And that letting Jesus have his way means let him have his way to love us and care for us and console us and to forgive us. Now here is this. I hope you don't throw me off the stage when I suggest this, but here it goes. Imagine, is Bishop Van, he's not here. Okay, good. No, that's fine because, well, wait till he gets a load of this. Here's our declaration maybe. As deacons in the Diocese of Orange, as a member of the Diaconate community in the Diocese of Orange, I declare that I will let Jesus have his way. I declare that I will let Jesus love me and love the people the way he wants to. What might that even sound like if we just repeated it? So just repeat after me if you would like to. As a deacon in the Diocese of Orange, as a member of the Diaconate community in the Diocese of Orange, I declare that I will let Jesus have his way. I declare that I will let Jesus love me and love the people the way he wants to. Amen. How might we be a new declaration that somebody has never heard before, that it's time to let Jesus have his way? The new evangelization also calls us to a newness of expression. So permeating the world with the love of Jesus means telling that great story nation, which invites us to live in the world as our best. We're called to live in the world as our best selves. Yes, Jesus is best selves as men and women, as deacons, as wives, as ministers, as husbands, as Catholics. Why selves? Because he became one of us. Because of the incarnation, which we are preparing to celebrate like we do every single year. We proclaim Jesus when we are our best selves because God became a human being. Imagine. God became a human being. God became one of us. So the best us we can be is the proclamation of Jesus in the world. This means that God, this is important, God is not a competitor with us. God is not interested in proving who God is. God is not interested in us proving that we are God, proving that God knows who we are. No. God is interested in us being fully ourselves. St. Irenaeus said, the glory of God is humanity fully of life. God is the ground and the source of all our humanity. Here's something very dramatic that maybe lots of folks aren't aware of, but it's the writing of the church fathers who say that the Word became flesh, that God became human, that human beings might share in the divine nature. So God became one of us so that we could share in who God is. That's very powerful. The fathers even used the term divinization to describe what they were talking about. They used such language to say that God became human, that we might be deified, if you were, that we might share in the divinity of Christ. Now, priests are reminded about this every single time we say Mass, but the words aren't out there loud, they're quietly. But when the deacons say this too, when you put the water into the wine, what do you say? What was that first part? May we come to share in the divinity of Christ. Pretty powerful. Who humbled himself to share in our humanity. That's exactly what I'm talking about. The call for a new evangelization is a call to realize now in our time and with our lives that Christianity, it's not just a piece of information. It's not just a historical fact. It is the Word made flesh. It is God become one of us. And I remember years ago, I heard a talking about how we got to make sure as a church that we're not a museum. You know, we're not just some collection of historical things that happened. We are a living, breathing, holy, divine entity because God became one of us. It is the Word that lives in us personally because God became one of us personally. Now, these are maybe some good ideas for Christmas homilies. I don't know, but remember, God loved us personally. And that is because he became a person like us. It is news that is so good and so necessary that no human being who has encountered it can keep it to his or herself. God becoming one of us, Word made flesh. This is kind of supposed to excite us so much that we can't wait. You know, it's like the little kid who gets the toy he or she wanted and I can't wait to tell my friend I got a new bike. I can't wait. Well, that's what our lives are really supposed to be like all the time. I can't wait to tell the world about this God of ours who became one of us in order to redeem us. It is a Christianity that we profess that calls us to be our best selves because that's who we really are. I remember one time somebody said, when we sin, we are not being ourselves. When we sin, we're not being ourselves because ourselves isn't our sin. Ourselves is the good people that God created. Our sin is what gets in the way of letting that shine forth. We are God's beloved. And it is really, I think, an answer to today's world to carry that within us, that we are God's beloved, and that is at the heart of what we profess. We need to do something, I think, about the idea that the world's goods can satisfy us. And Bishop Barron says, you know, we're wired for God. As God is the source of our humanity, we are ultimately drawn to the source of our own being. And as St. Augustine said, our hearts are not fully satisfied until they rest in God. In the world, there are so many what some people call false satisfier. What is a false satisfier? Well, a false satisfier are things that we think can bring us ultimate satisfaction, but they really can't. But we still are drawn to them, and everybody almost is drawn to them. Like, what is it? Wealth, power, success, pleasure, honor, prestige, the place of honor. Those things are things that can satisfy us, but only for a little while. Those things we know cannot sustain us over the long haul. But I know in my life, and I think it might be true for you as well, sometimes we have a compromised heart. We are drawn to God, and then we let ourselves get sucked in sometimes by the false satisfiers. And that's true of our people too. We are wired for God. We're all drawn to God, yes. But we can get sucked in by all the other stuff that's out there. And that's when we preach and when we minister and when we're present. Those are all the things that really need to be kept in mind. And we're not immune from the false satisfiers. And I think we have a special responsibility to help us reroot ourselves in the one who is the source of our being. We need to recognize where our own hearts might be compromised. And maybe this retreat can be a time to just kind of examine that honestly, Where might your heart or my heart be compromised by the attraction of the false satisfiers of being popular or always being in control or a certain amount of money or prestige or admiration, whatever it might be. Our call is to be new in our desire to be our best selves. Our best selves are our most human selves. And we will be drawn to the source, the God who made us. We will find inspiration there, and we will find rest there if we reroute things, if we need to focusing on our God. The new evangelization also calls us, as you know, to a newness of method in the ways that we tell the great story of which Jesus is the culmination. We are to be new, says our church, in the ways that we proclaim the presence of Jesus in the world. It is a newness of method on how we go about filling up the world with Jesus. What do I mean by that? Well, I think it's important sometimes to remember that in the world, every so often, there's a world-changing thing that happens, a world-changing invention, for example, like the invention of the printing press was world-changing because it allowed the Bible to be printed for the first time and therefore more distributed than it ever could have been. And it really was the first major breakthrough in communication. Well, we well know some other world-changing inventions in our own time. The internet, social media, and other technological capabilities, where we can get instant access to information and contact. It is unprecedented in the ways that information, as we know, is disseminated. And now we have this new phenomenon called artificial intelligence, which adds another layer to the challenge that we have and what we have to think about if we're going to communicate Jesus to the world. There was a time when, and it was true, pretty much in the church, when all we had to do was speak and people would listen. Nope, that doesn't happen anymore. Do you all remember, or some of you remember that old commercial when Dean Witter speaks? Oh yeah. Everybody listens, the investment company. Well, it used to be when the church spoke, everybody listened. Not so. And listening didn't always mean that everybody agreed. It just meant everybody paid attention. Okay, but there's so many other things that get our attention and vie for our attention that we have to think about how we're trying to get the message out there about the Lord. We cannot, in other words, just make some kind of commentary or assessment about what's going on out there and then think that that is going to do the trick. The new evangelization, it invites us to rethink this whole way that we communicate. Yeah, we got to speak. Of course we do. Why do you think I teach that homiletics class? I mean, that's important. We have to speak. And at the same time, it is not always the place to begin. And our tendency, at least in my experience, is to begin with the chatter, with the talk. And that's not necessarily the best place to begin. As St. John Paul II says, he says that both the believer and the society whose faith has grown old and stale need passion. They need the burning conviction of people who have been enraptured by a surpassing beauty, who have been loved beyond their imaginings and hopes, and who are thus people who love. Bishop Barron says that the best way to pursue people is to begin with the beautiful. He says that the true and the good can come later. But what we really need to do is start with the beautiful. What we tend to start with is with the true and with the good. And then if we have time, we get to the beautiful. So what Bishop Barron says, if we begin with the true and the good, sometimes that just puts people's defenses up. And then they won't listen to anything else. What we have to do is we have to be attractive in the ways that we present ourselves as a church. And what does it mean concretely? Well, let's think about beauty. Beauty gets all of us. It beguiles us, as they say. Somebody once said the only difference between human beings and brute existence is the aesthetic. And that means the beautiful. The only creatures of God that can create beauty and can recognize beauty are us. So it means it's a tremendous gift, and it's a tremendously part of who we are, just like love. We're the only creatures of God that can love, you know. I mean, it seems like our dogs and cats love us, and maybe they kind of do. I don't know, but it's not like it. Human love is there's nothing like it, and beauty is the same way. It's like a baseball coach. Can you imagine the good baseball coach? The good baseball coach the good one doesn't begin with the rules. The first thing is the rules. No. The good baseball coach begins by showcasing the famous players, showcasing how they manifested the art of the game. Notice what I said, the art of the game. The good coach first talks about the beauty of the field, the diamond shape, the interplay of grass and soil. I mean, it's very evident whenever you go to a especially professional baseball park, that beautiful configuration there. And that is what gets the players engaged. Once they are engaged in the game, because of its beauty, now they're ready to hear the rules. Now they're ready to hear how do we play. I think that so much of our ministries in our pastoral approach, sometimes we begin with the rules and the strategies instead of first manifesting the beauty of the life. So, for example, and you might have heard me say this in the homiletics class, but it's like somebody calls the rectory to plan for a baptism. Hello, I'd like to see about getting my baby baptized at Christ Cathedral. What's the first question usually that's there? Are you registered in the parish? Did you follow the rule and get registered in the parish? And guess what? If you didn't, well, we don't know. I don't know. And now those godparents, you know what we require the godparents, don't you? You know, and you know, Is that attractive? No. No wonder people don't like to come to church or go somewhere else. How about if it's, oh my goodness, how wonderful that you had this child, that you have a baby. Congratulations. How can we help? That's the thing. Acknowledge the beauty of the gift of life. It is the beautiful liturgy that will invite people to get more into things, not telling them that they should be more committed. And to show that by coming to Mass. Your presence here proves to us that you're committed. Well, of course, people are committed. That's why they come to Mass. The way to have people draw to come to the liturgy is not by shouting out stuff like that. It's about creating a beautiful, irresistible liturgy. That's why the church asks us to pay attention to that. Now, I hope you don't get offended by this thing that I hate. But I really, really don't like the practice in parishes of making the kids in faith formation have the slip signed that they went to Mass as a proof that they went to Mass. I think that's horrible. I think it teaches something terrible to the children. First of all, it teaches mistrust. So did you go to Mass? And they don't, the kid automatically starts out believing that they don't trust that he did or she. And then to have that be the indicator of Mass attendance, I just don't like it. Now, and I personally don't like it because there's all these people that want to say hello, and I'm sitting there signing all these, as everybody, all these slips. Anyway, that's just an editorial. Here's a little story I want to share with you about the beauty, okay? Example. Some years ago, when we first started at the Christ Cathedral campus, we had these outdoor movies. And we had these outdoor movies, and we invited the neighborhood to come, and it was very cool. Put up a screen, people sat out there on the grass and everything. Well, one Sunday, the Sunday of the weekend, we had a movie. It was after I don't know what Mass it was, 9:30 at the time. It was in the Arboretum, and there's this young guy about in his 20s, like early 20s, looked like to me. And he came out, and he's all happy. He comes right up. He says, "Father," he says, "that was beautiful." I said, "What was?" "The Mass." "Well, yeah, I think it was pretty nice." He said, "I haven't been to Mass for years. I haven't been to Mass for years. And I'm so glad I came." He said, "The music was beautiful. The message, oh man, I'm going to come every Sunday." I said, "Why did you come to Mass this Sunday?" One word: Frozen. That was the movie that we had shown the night before on the campus. So he said, "Father, I figured any church that shows Frozen on their front lawn at night for free is worth taking a look into." So that's what I mean, that kind of thing as the invitation. Of course, we have the rules and the regulations and all those things that need to be adhered to. The point that the church folks make is that's not always the best place to start. It's the clean and good repair parish plant that's going to attract people. And, a lot of times when I've addressed pastors, I give this new pastor workshop program. And some of the pastors say, well, that's all great, but, we just can't afford it. Place smells or whatever it is, and there's plenty of them around, even in the Diocese of Orange, that turns people off. It is the beautiful, I'm not talking about beautiful as in what's that word? Opulent. No, I'm talking about something that's beautiful, that's maintained well, that kind of thing. And I think sometimes we might need to rethink, how we do spend our money. I had, notice had, I had a good friend who is a priest, and he actually said that keeping things ugly on purpose and shoddy was a sign of aligning with materially poor people. Yeah. He thought we can't make this too nice because everybody can't have nice things. In other words, that was the idea. Well, I said it's the beauty, the attractiveness of being disciples of Jesus and inviting people to places that are in good repair, that I said it really is a sign of disrespect to the people when we don't do our best to keep things beautiful. I mean, I know there was a crew that came ahead of the retreat today to set up the room and set up the liturgy space, and none of that just happened by itself. And what if you would have walked into the retreat tonight and all these chairs were just all scattered all over the place, and there was no thoughtful, obviously thoughtful way to arrange the altar and the art that's there and all that kind of stuff? You'd probably feel bad, like, I guess they didn't really care that much about us this year, and it's not that hard. This stuff isn't all that hard. I had a dear sister, religious sister, who said, and I'd like to remember it. She said, in the ways that she was a teacher. She talked about this with her classrooms, and she said, and she applied it even to our person. She says, when you encounter somebody, it should seem to them that you are expecting them all along. I always have remembered that, so that we just have a countenance about us that says, you know what, I've been expecting you all along. That's beautiful. That's what beauty is about. It is the beauty, the attractiveness of being disciples Jesus can count on that are the primary attractors. We are called as people of the church, deacons, spouses, ministers, to reflect on this. And that is that the places where we are, the places that we are assigned, the organizations that we're part of, whatever it is, these are places that are unique in all the world. In other words, the parishes where we are, the places where we are, whether they've been there for 100 years or just a few months, whether they're big or small or rich or poor, whether they are well-known or obscure, these are the unique places that we have the opportunity to be disciples that Jesus can count on. Somebody once said, the providence of God is right where you are. So if we really wish that we were in maybe a different parish or remember where you are, that's where God put you for the moment. And that's what the providence of God is all about. Bishop Barron says, evangelization is based on Jesus Christ rocking our world. And so my question to all of us is, Jesus rocking our world? And if Jesus is rocking our world, does anybody? It should be clear that Jesus rocks our world if Jesus really is rocking our world. And if Jesus isn't, and this is a tough one, considering. I love this that Francis says, the church is not a little chapel that holds only a small group of persons, but rather a church is so large that it can hold all of humanity. So I say in these very troubled times that we live in, and Lord knows these are tough, tough times with all the terrible war and conflict that's going on in the world and violence and all the very, very difficult things that go on and suffering that's going on and the fractured in our own world, our own society, sometimes even in our own families. Renewing our commitment to evangelizing, permeating the world with Jesus as disciples that Jesus can count on, happens only if we are pulled to the future by placing this as the most important part of our lives. That, I won't get off on this much right now, but there's something that's called the push of the past and the pull of the future. And the push of the past is all the stuff that pushes at us when we come, especially new into a situation, and we don't even know we're being pushed by it, but we're being pushed sometimes by the policies of a different administration or whatever it might be, or if it's at work by a different boss or people or whatever. We're pushed by the past, and we need to be pulled to the future by something. If you are ever feeling what some call rudderless, or kind of like this sailboat going around in circles, and I certainly have from time to time, the reason is because nothing is pulling me to the future. I'm kind of stuck. That's why people get so disoriented when a loved one dies, when a spouse dies, or maybe there's a terrible illness or whatever it is, because the love of one's life that helped pull one to the future isn't there anymore. And so now everything has to be kind of re-navigated. And every once in a while we do have to re-navigate. And that's what I'd like to invite us on this retreat to think about. What's pulling me to the future? And it's not just usually one thing, but what's pulling us to the future? And included in that is what's pulling us to the future, this zeal for really wanting to be an instrument of saturating the world with Jesus. If you are rudderless right now, if you do have a sense of, that's okay. That's just fine. Just know what it is. Don't be too hard on yourself because it is that way, because that's how it is sometimes. And that's why every once in a while we need a friend, we need a book or music or something to kind of say, wow, yeah, oh, let me rethink this. Okay. And every once in a while, I've had to re-navigate my future since I retired. Do you think that helping to build that campus and being part of that thing from the beginning didn't have some place of pulling me to the future, to have a place that is wonderful and beautiful for for our church to bring people? Yes, it occupied a big part of my life. It doesn't in the same way that it did, but it's been really, I must say, kind of fun to re-navigate. And to just sit there and say, I'm not sure where the big tug's going. The future. So I finish with this. On Easter Sunday, a couple of years ago, he came up to me and he looked me in the eye, and he just looked at me and he said, "Father," he said, "thank you." And then he embraced me, and then he started crying, And he embraced me, and he wouldn't let go. I was kind of getting a little scared. I mean, but his heart, he was crying. And now I'm not talking about like little tears. You know, that kind of weeping that's just from deep inside, shaking kind of crying. That's what he was doing. Oh, he was crying. And then I said something brilliant. I said, "Are you all right?" He said, "No." And then he said it again, "But thank you, thank you, thank you." He let go, and then he walked away. Now, to this day, I do not know who he was. I don't know why he was weeping. I don't know why he said thank you to me. Perhaps that man's thank you that day was for something wonderful in his heart that had moved him. Maybe, I don't know. Or maybe his thank you was his last defense against some tragedy or setback or hurt. Sometimes thank you can be a last defense against some kind of tragedy in life. I don't know what it was for him. But what I do know, that he was in my arms that day, and he was saying thank you to me. And for me, that experience is reflected in every person who asks for my blessing, my prayers, my advice, or my presence at some occasion, happy or sad. That person is reflected in the same thing for all of you as well. What I do know is that our distinctive role as deacons, priests, spouses, parents, ministers, leaders, is to have the capacity, as Pope Benedict says, to reintroduce into hearts that are dull, to reintroduce beauty into our oftentimes unbeautiful and desperate world. If we can do that in whatever way that makes sense, that is the disciple that Jesus can count on. And it's great to be with all of you disciples that Jesus can count on right here and now, and I thank you for that. So I have a little song that I'd like to invite us to just sit with for a little while, just for a moment. Can't talk about the beautiful without having something. So let's just listen. So I mentioned that there's opportunity to do some reflection and maybe some sharing in your book. The notes are there from my talk, but also there's a page that has some reflection questions on them for you. And I'd just like to invite you to take a little bit of time. It's called Disciples Jesus Can Count On. What does being a disciple Jesus can count on mean for you? How might you proclaim the presence of Jesus by being your best self? What do you think about beauty as the gateway to the heart? What's pulling you to the future?
Not knowing what to expect. And then us saying yes, not knowing what to expect. We never expected this much beauty. When you talked about beauty tonight, we never expected that much beauty in this ministry. And tonight we have a chance to reflect on that. We have a chance to reflect on all that Father Christopher has talked about. So I encourage you to do that. Some of you really like to get together in groups. That's beautiful. There's plenty of places that can find some time. We will also have the Blessed Sacrament Chapel open in just a few minutes. Is Modesto here yet?